Now when we begin to see this, we begin to understand the importance of what the Buddha is trying to say. But even today, we find that people are not able to fully gain control of the emotions. This is the biggest problem. So the Buddha pointed out a way. There is a way of doing it. But very few modern psychologists care to look at Buddhism or the teaching of the Buddha. Partly because today the teaching of the Buddha is hidden. Because even the Buddhists themselves have lost touch with the original teachings. Today we have different schools of Buddhism that try to interpret the teachings of the Buddha in different ways. So when a non-Buddhist or a Westerner comes to study Buddhism, there is a problem. The Tibetan Buddhists will say this is the teaching of the Buddha and teach that. That is their dogma, is taught. The Chinese will say, no, that's not the real teaching of the Buddha. Our way is the real teaching of the Buddha. Or the Japanese will say, no, we have the real original teaching and teach that. Or maybe the Burmese will bring another point of view and say, this is the real teaching. Or the Sri Lankans will also come and say, well, that is not what it is, this is the teaching. So different schools of Buddhism begin to say different things. We have mainly three kinds of Buddhism today. What is called Theravada, Mahayana and Vajrayana. But they are all interpretations of the original teachings. That's not the original teaching. I, of course, was born in a Theravada country. But from my young days, I began to question, is this the real teaching of the Buddha? Because I was a student of science. And so I began to doubt some of the things that was taught as the teaching of the Buddha. So I began to find the original teaching. What is the original teaching of the Buddha? I found that it was preserved by the Theravadins in the sutras. But they had commentators or commentaries written down explaining the sutras. And it is the commentaries that make the mistake. But people begin to blindly follow those things as a tradition. This is what is called traditionalism. People blindly follow traditions. So every culture is doing that. The Christians blindly follow the Christian Bible. The Jews blindly follow the Jewish, what do you call that? Torah. Huh? And Muslims blindly follow the Quran. And the Hindus blindly follow the Vedas. So the Buddhists blindly follow the what they call the Tripitaka. But even there, they are mainly following the commentaries and what is called the Abhidharma. But the real teaching is found in the early sutras. But there is a difficulty in getting at the sutra. The difficulty is the language. It's a dead language. So because it is a dead language, the meanings are lost because certain words have been getting into modern languages. Like, for example, the word nirvana. That was the word used by the Buddha, but it has become an English word also now. It's in the dictionary. So in a similar way, you have the words like karma, also similar word. But this happened in the Indian languages more. More words got into the Indian languages. Like even the word Sinhalese in Sri Lanka, or Hindi in India. So when these words have been picked up in the modern languages, the meaning of the word gradually begins to change. And when the meanings change, when they read the sutras, they begin to think, oh, that word means this. That means the meaning is different. So things like that happen. So it's a very difficult job to understand these things. So I have been struggling through many years to understand this. I don't say that I have discovered everything and I have found the real truth. But I would say that whatever I have found, I think it is correct. I may be wrong at the same time. So I can only share what I understand with you, and you have to judge for yourself. There is one way that Buddhism can be properly judged, whether it is the original teaching or not. Because it is talking about a problem and its solution. And if the problem is solved by what I say or whatever you find, then you can say that is the real teaching of the Buddha. Because the Buddha is supposed to have solved the problem. So it's not just some dogma coming from one culture. It has to be a discovery. And every person has to discover this for himself or herself. That's the important thing. You cannot just take it from another person, because you have this doubt that the other person can be wrong. So, according to your level of maturity in your thinking, you will be able to understand the teaching of the Buddha. That's the important way to see it. And when it is understood, you will find that your problem has been solved also. So it's the solution of the problem that is the real test. That's why the Buddha said, just as a goldsmith will test what is given as gold by a particular method, and it is only by doing that a person can really find out whether it is real gold or not. So in a similar way, when anyone speaks about the teachings of the Buddha, you should test it with your own experience as the crucible. Put it into that crucible and test it. So in a similar way, you should test what I say also. You should not take it blindly.